Welcome back, and welcome especially to our next guest, another of our favorite free range minds when it comes to public policy writ large, but particularly some creative thinking about national security policy, which is, of course, the focus of this program. Before we get to our guest, I want to just give you a little bit of context with thoughts of my own. There's something surreal about the enemy within's determined defund the police 2.0. Those communist jihadists and their fellow travelers doing business as the Democratic Party, with a few irresponsible Republicans, are demanding that we effectively disarm ICE at a moment when we need it more than ever to find and remove or otherwise neutralize, quote, the worst, unquote, of the illegal immigrants in America. By any definition, such illegals would include tens of thousands of Chinese soldiers now inside this country, especially when it appears they can tap perhaps 20 biological warfare laboratories here, too. CIA veteran Sam Faddis warns that based on the 2 labs discovered so far, their contents could kill between 60 to 90% of those infected. Consequently, the treacherous anti-ICE enemies within are also among the worst of the worst. They must be treated as such. Well, those are some of my thoughts. For more of them, follow me at Frank Gaffney on X and also at usfuture.org, the homepage of the Institute for the American Future. And I'm very pleased to be able to say we have the chairman of the board of that institute, Rod Martin, in the house. He is a regular contributor to this program, for which we are profoundly grateful. He is a free-range mind, as I've said, and we look forward always to the insights that he provides through the Rod Martin Report at rodmartin.org, as well as his color commentaries here and in a lot of other places besides, all of which you can find at rodmartin.org. Rod, welcome back. It's so good to have you with us, my friend.
Very good to be here.
Well, listen, I'd like to pick up on this theme, Rod. I know you're giving a lot of thought to it. I think you have a piece by one of your guest commentators on your site about what's going on with ICE at the moment. Do you think it's overstating the level of, well, not just vitriol, but concerted political warfare action against ICE that we saw in 2020 on steroids in 2020?
It's effectively identical, and it's effectively identical to what we were seeing in the early part of last year with the anti-ICE riots in Los Angeles and the illegal immigrants standing up on cars waving Mexican flags and all of this crazy stuff. But it's also not new. We saw these exact things in previous decades. People forget, for instance, in the 1970s, for a while we were averaging 1,500 domestic terror bombings per year by Democrats. And let's be clear, it's not socialists, it's not Marxists, it's not left-wingers, it's Democrats. They're all Democrats, and good luck finding a Republican equivalent. You can always single out some individual nutball, to say, oh, see, it's both sides. No, Republicans were not blowing up 1,500 things a year, ever. That didn't happen. So what is it? Well, it's very consistently things that will radicalize the mob in a way that is intended to delegitimize and ideally depose the Democrats' political enemies. It's never anything else. And the perfect example of this is Iran. So, we've got all these people out in the streets just going nuts to oppose the genocide in Gaza, which is absurd because, as we now know, the Israeli Defense Forces managed to keep the civilian to military casualty ratio to the lowest level in the history of urban warfare. But, everybody's in the streets, genocide. Well, in Iran, The regime is murdering tens of thousands of innocent, unarmed protesters on camera. We're watching it. And not one of those people who cared about the people of Gaza cares about anybody in Iran. And it's a little hard to fathom until you realize that the dots are easy to connect. That narrative does not advance the Democrats in the midterms in the United States. And that's the ball game. So we see this across the board. And the ICE thing is twofold. First, and we know this from the Signal group that has now been released to the world, there's no question. These people are being actively trained professionally for the purpose of trying to provoke law enforcement to overreact. And they're trying to catch that on film so that they can delegitimize the Trump administration, so they can win the election. And the minute you have anything else that's horrifying and roughly similar, like the murder of Irina Zarutska, the assassination of Charlie Kirk, Blue Sky goes crazy, not only cheering their death, but listing people they want murdered next. So it's very selective outrage. It is aimed at provoking an overreaction by authorities that for the most part hasn't happened, and maybe completely hasn't happened. And if they can get it to happen, then they demonize the very idea of law enforcement, which gives them an opening to replace the Trump administration in whole or in part and take power. I assure you, when in power, all of these police agencies will have super strength.
I suspect that's absolutely accurate. They will be turned, as the police of New York City have been under Mamdani, into at best bystanders, at worst actual celebrants in things like Muslim Hijab Day in Central Park and the like, and I think enforcers of a radical left agenda, and possibly a jihadist one to boot. Ron, I wanted to ask you about something I mentioned in my commentary that I find particularly alarming about this reprise of the strategy of color revolutionaries, namely undermining respect for the authorities and their power, in effect, their control. The timing of all of this is particularly ominous, it seems to me, as it comes, as I mentioned, when not only are there countless numbers of jihadis who came into the United States over Joe Biden's open borders, but there are estimated to be tens of thousands of Chinese soldiers that did the same. And I wanted to talk to you about that and the fact that, as best I can tell, the administration never mentions them. Not in categorizing the worst of the worst, not in identifying those who are being, rounded up and deported. But what's up with that, Rod? Am I misunderstanding the danger that this could represent to our country? And if not, is there another explanation for why the administration is doing it, other than that they're, kind of pandering to the Chinese and not wanting to alarm Americans by making the obvious point that we really need to be on a war footing in light of this circumstance? Your thoughts?
I might take that just slightly differently there at the end. I think we are negotiating with the Chinese, and we don't want to alarm the public. If you say we've got all of these Chinese soldiers in America, we see it as a real threat, they're not here on vacation, well, then you have to do something about it. And the logical thing to do about it is bomb Beijing. We don't want to do that. So you need to kind of quietly round them up and get rid of them. And I was making this point on another friend's show this morning. A wonderful pastor who has a news show, of all things, on American Family Radio. And he was asking about this same stuff. It's like, look, we have a throughput issue. We have a bandwidth issue, however you want to say it. There's a reason we built Alligator Alcatraz. You know, the Democrats flooded 10 million illegals into the country in just Biden's 4 years. They did it deliberately. Some of your hearers have heard of Cloward Piven. You know, it's that kind of thing. You only have so many immigration judges. We have so many illegal aliens in this country, and it didn't just start with Biden. We have so many that it would take between 30 and 40 years for them to all get in front of an immigration judge. Well, by that time, the damage is done. Who even cares? And that was the point, overwhelm the system. So if you create an Alligator Alcatraz, which is conveniently located right beside a giant runway, you actually have a place to put people where you can funnel them through the judges who are on site and march them right out to the transport plane. And so the administration's being very deliberate about increasing bandwidth and making sure that...
Rod, this is tremendously problematic, I believe, especially when you tie in the idea that these Chinese soldiers, who we may not have the bandwidth to deal with right now, though I think the American people can help with that, and we'll talk more about that on the other side of this break. But I also want to talk about the Biolabs feature of what they may be up to. Stay tuned, folks. We're back, and so, thank God, is Rod Martin. We're talking about an issue about which I know he is concerned, as I think are all of our Committee on the Present Danger China members, of which he is one. And I think every red-blooded American should be very concerned about, and that is the prospect that Xi Jinping, who heads a Chinese Communist Party that has made no secret of its desire to destroy this country, has insinuated into it, thanks to Joe Biden's over 4 years of open borders, I should say. We have anybody's guess how many of these Chinese soldiers are here now, but it's the best estimates I've heard are somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to maybe 200,000 of them. But Rod, in addition to what they could do in the way of harm through sabotage or cyber operations or, assassinations or what have you, there's also the distinct possibility that they are going to use the contents of bio-warfare laboratories that apparently have also been insinuated into this country. We know of two of them, one in Reedley, California, the other in Las Vegas, that have been, seized by our government. But there are reports that there may be as many as 18 more, for a total of 20. The Select Committee in the House on the Chinese Communist Party warned that it is almost certainly the case that there are more of these. What are we to make of the possibility that not only are they as yet undetected, but they could, like the first two, be replete with some extraordinarily virulent biological diseases, weaponized for the purposes of, as we were told, Deng Xiaoping, the Chinese ruler back in the 1990s, said reportedly to his biological warfare program, your mission is to depopulate the United States so that it can be colonized by China. Well, bioweapons are a way to do that, are they not?
They are. They're a bit of a tricky weapon to use successfully. I mean, you can definitely kill a lot of Americans, but when you do, you're going to kill a lot of everybody else, generally speaking. Now, if you could get to a technology that was sufficiently advanced, perhaps you could genetically select for particular races or ages or different things. Whether they are that advanced hasn't been seen to my knowledge, but I'm sure the world's moving that direction. So I'm not overly concerned about them when they realize, wait, this is going to kill everybody in Shanghai too. But it doesn't mean they wouldn't do something crazy. And that's really what's scary about the current purge in progress in Beijing. It's not the beginning. It's kind of maybe not the end, but it's definitely toward the end of a process in which Xi Jinping has been removing his smart, competent people who could possibly be a threat to his position or a possible successor. And he's gone through the ranks of the Chinese government and just created an environment of yes men everywhere, which certainly he's now doing with the Central Military Commission. It's a 9-member commission, and they're down to 2 members, and he's one of them. And he's gotten rid of all of the people with actual operational experience in an actual combat situation at the top of the PLA. Okay, well, amateur yes men gamble. They do things they ought to know better than to do because they don't have the experience to know that they're idiots. And those are the kind of people who might use bioweapons and the kind of people who might invade Taiwan. And so we should be really concerned about this and watch it. And it's really been interesting as this has unfolded to see that Zhang Youxia, the top military leader whom she just purged, who doesn't seem to be dead, and the military seems to be pretty upset about his removal. But he seems to be the guy, and he's certainly not just the most senior guy, but one of the few senior guys with actual combat experience, pretty significant combat experience. He seems to be the one who's trying to tamp the brakes on the Taiwan thing. So I'm actually pretty concerned about it. I don't think the probability of any of this is happening is especially high, but it's non-zero. I mean, these things are real. They can happen, and the conditions are coming into place where somebody might get stupid. So in the United States, I'll just add this on the Biolabs. You don't have to do much work to insinuate bioweapons labs into the United States. When Anthony Fauci was funding bioweapons labs in China with US tax dollars, and that went on for decades. We know it did. That's not a controversial statement except to people who aren't paying attention. And so our government has been up to its eyeballs in this for a very long time, and cleaning that up is going to be very interesting.
Interesting and probably time-consuming, which is, again,
Yes.
part of what my concern here is that we may not have the time. And Rod, let me just say that as you look at the Chinese options here, what they have created is potentially game-changing, for sure. And to the extent that we have nowhere near the kind of counterintelligence or ICE or FBI special agent inventory to go up against these possible threat vectors, it's even more alarming. And that brings me back to the point that I was making earlier, Rod. I just would like your thoughts on it, possibly on the other side of this short break. Namely, that given all those circumstances, we have an imperative need to crowdsource to the American people the situational awareness, as the military likes to call it, that's required to help find these Chinese soldiers, or for that matter, jihadis, and their biolabs. Not to take matters into their own hands. This is not a call for vigilantism, but it is a call for enlisting the American people in this effort to, deal with dire threats, and start by educating them about those threats. It requires truth-telling. We'll be right back with Rod Martin's response right after this. We're back, and so is Rod Martin, to whom I had put the question, shouldn't we be engaging the American people in trying to find and get the authorities to root out Chinese nationals, jihadists, and others who are inside our wire and seeking the destruction of our country. And Rod, I'd be interested in your considered thought on the question. I'm asserting, and I think I'm correct in doing so, that we're not hearing about any of this from Tom Homan or other officials of the United States government. I think when pressed by an informed questioner, they'll respond, but they're certainly not raising the alarm. And you were speculating about why that is, but what I'm really asking is, can we afford to have that remain the case? And shouldn't we be trying to make sure that the American people are clued up about it? And hopefully part of the solution through this sort of crowdsourced mechanism that I was talking about.
I think that sometimes it's better when the government is quiet about things and when it distracts. And Trump is a master of distraction. It remains to be seen exactly what the deal we've worked out over Greenland is. But making that the focus of everything leading into the WEF was just brilliant, because it distracted all those ding-dongs from mucking up what he was trying to do to get peace in Ukraine and, gathering the armada for Iran and whatever he has in mind there. The last thing you need is Emmanuel Macron mucking around in it. So, he's really good at distracting people from things while he actually does what he set out to do. And, we were just talking off air about Panama. This is a perfect example. The Panamanians grabbed control of both ends of the canal, more than that, but definitely that much, in the 90s. Bill Clinton has just gotten reelected. This deal goes through for the Chinese to run the ports at both ends of the canal, and we haven't even handed over the canal yet. Clinton does that 2 years later. So, what the heck? And of course, I think Peter Schweitzer could be enlightening as to what the heck in that case, but that's neither here nor there. The point is, Trump came into office saying, we're taking back the canal. Now, of course, everybody heard we're going to invade Panama and, go on a conquest spree. That's not what he meant. He meant we're going to get control of the security of the thing. So Rubio went down there, Hegseth went down there. We got an agreement, saying we're gonna resume basing in the region. We're gonna have more defense cooperation. We're gonna do more investment into Panama. Blah blah blah. And oh, by the way, we're gonna negotiate this business deal to buy the port leases from Hutchison. Okay, well, that's all fine and good. And everybody laughed at Trump, as usual. Oh, he's crazy. That'll never work. Xi Jinping will never agree to that. Well, you're right. Xi Jinping never did agree to that. And now the Panamanian Supreme Court, in response to an audit by the Comptroller General of the country, has ruled that China's control of these infrastructure assets is unconstitutional. Their entire deal is going to be unwound by the Panamanians, and the deal Trump negotiated is going to go through, or something like it. This is how he plays. If Maduro had taken the deal, we wouldn't have had to go on and gotten him, and he wouldn't be sitting in a prison cell in New York. If the Ayatollah will take the deal, he might survive too. If he doesn't, it's going to be a decapitation strike, I'm guessing. And that's really true in how Trump plays everywhere. You can take the carrot or you're getting the stick.
Interesting enough. Let me ask you about another deal that the president has recently struck, and that involves India. What do we know about it, and what would you reckon are going to be the strategic repercussions of it, including, among others, for the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, the biggest thing is that it's yet another validation of Trump's thesis that the American consumer market is indispensable. And every time we turn around, there's some gaggle of yahoos telling us on TV that all our enemies are just going to gang up on us and they'll just quit doing business with us, and they'll just sell into Africa or they'll sell into this country and they'll be fine and we'll be broke. No. No, we're 26% of the world's economy. We're the biggest consumer market in the world. They can't do without us, especially when they have built an entire economy on exports, which is more true, certainly, of China than of India, but India's headed in that direction fast. So, of course, they've all done deals, and of course, they're all somewhat lopsided in our favor on the headline numbers because they still have non-tariff trade barriers that's accounting for. But the headline number in the India deal is really kind of staggering. What's been announced is an 18% U.S. tariff on imports from India and a 0% Indian tariff on imports from the United States. That's just nothing but a surrender. And that's kind of what Xi Jinping agreed to, only his deal was worse. So, this is the thing. The American market is indispensable. Donald Trump understands it. Nobody else in Washington before Donald Trump seemed to understand it. And that's remaking the world. So what happens from there? Well, we were told that India was going to gang up with Russia and China and, beat us all to death. Well, that's funny because they just made a deal. That was all for show. That's petulance, saber rattling, generally trying to tell Trump, we don't need you. Yeah, you need him. And he knows it. So you're not getting out of the box. And so what this does is it also facilitates the growth of the U.S.-Indian strategic relationship. It facilitates the growth of the Quad. It puts China in a bigger box. And that's really the ultimate aim of the Trump foreign policy from an offensive perspective. Contain China such that the risk of invading Taiwan or starting a war with us is just too costly to contemplate. I think he's getting there.
From your lips to God's ears, my friend, it's always heartening to hear this optimism about what Donald Trump is doing and the progress that he's making, including in this deal with India. Keep them coming, if you would. These reports are invaluable. God bless you, my friend. Also,
and you.
Keep up the good work at the Rod Martin Report. We'll talk with the rest of you next time. Until then, go forth and multiply.